When Evelyn walked out of our house that morning, she didn't look back. The sharp click of her heels on the wet driveway sounded like the final tick of a clock that had run out of time. I stood by the glass door, pretending the quiet didn't sting. Our marriage had dissolved long before she packed her leather bags, fading into silent dinners and polite nods. The signed divorce papers sat on the kitchen counter like a receipt for a transaction we both regretted. The first few days of being alone were heavy. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought peace. It was the kind that settled into your chest, making you trace the outline of every mistake you ever made. I kept expecting to hear her keys rattle in the hallway, but there was only the low hum of the refrigerator echoing through the empty, desolate space. Then the truth found its way to me. A mutual friend sent a message containing a single photo of Evelyn at a restaurant downtown, holding hands with a man she always told me not to worry about. The timestamp was dated 2 days before she even mentioned wanting a divorce. She hadn't fallen out of love. She had simply secured her next destination before checking out of our life. I sat in the dark living room, staring at the screen, feeling a cold numbness spread through me. Every memory of her late nights, her sudden business trips, and her emotional distance shifted into sharp focus. I realized I had been mourning a partnership that had been built on a foundation of quiet exit strategies and elaborate lies. 2 days later, a soft knock sounded at the door. Standing under the porch light was Clara, Evelyn's younger sister. She was the one who had always stood apart from her family's obsession with appearances, the one who saw right through Evelyn's polished facade. Clara looked nervous, her hands tucked deep into her coat pockets, her hair damp from the evening mist. She held a small cardboard box containing a few of my old records and journals she had found at her parents' house. When I stepped aside, she walked in slowly, looking around the room as if trying to measure the weight of the emptiness. She confessed she shouldn't have come, but she couldn't bear to let me believe the false narrative Evelyn was spinning to everyone else. Clara sat at my kitchen table, her voice trembling slightly but clear. She told me Evelyn had been planning the split for nearly a year, carefully arranging her finances and her new relationship while pretending to try to save our marriage. Hearing it out loud from her own family didn't hurt as much as I expected. Instead, it felt like a heavy anchor had finally been lifted from my shoulders. The self-doubt that had kept me awake for weeks dissolved entirely. Clara looked at me with genuine empathy, her eyes reflecting the same exhaustion I carried. We stayed up for hours talking about our pasts, discovering a quiet understanding that had never existed between Evelyn and me. When she finally rose to leave, the rain had stopped, and the house felt lighter, warmer, and somehow more inviting. Clara started visiting every few days. At first, it was under the guise of returning forgotten items or checking on how I was coping, but soon the excuses disappeared. She would bring over takeout food, share books she loved, or help me paint over the cold, gray walls Evelyn had insisted on. Unlike her sister, Clara was grounded and authentic. She laughed at my dry jokes and listened when I spoke, never trying to steer the conversation back to herself. We built a steady, comfortable rhythm that felt entirely natural. One evening, as we sat together on the sofa watching the rain beat against the window, she admitted she had always felt like an outsider in her own family until she started talking to me, finding safety in our quiet conversations. The shift between us was subtle, but undeniable. It wasn't born of desperation, but of two people finding quiet solace in the aftermath of a storm. When she left that night, I realized I hadn't thought about my failed marriage in days. But our peace was interrupted when Evelyn decided to show up unannounced to collect the rest of her art pieces. She let herself in with her spare key, stopping dead when she saw the rearranged living room, the warm lighting, and the colorful throw blanket Clara had left on the armchair. Her eyes narrowed as she processed the change. When she asked who had been helping me redecorate, I didn't lie. I told her Clara had been stopping by and that we had been spending time together. Evelyn's reaction was immediate and venomous. She accused us of betrayal, claiming Clara was only using me to get back at her for childhood rivalries and family dramas. I stood my ground, looking at her with a calm indifference that seemed to frustrate her more than anger ever would have. I pointed out the hypocrisy of her outrage, reminding her of the time-stamped photos from before our split. For a moment, her polished composure cracked, revealing the hollow insecurity underneath. She realized she could no longer control the narrative or my emotions. She grabbed her belongings and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. This time, the sound didn't echo with regret. It felt like a final, welcome exclamation point on a chapter that had desperately needed to end. That night, Clara came over, her face filled with worry after receiving an angry text from her sister. I opened the door and pulled her into a quiet embrace, letting her know that the storm had finally passed, and we were completely free. We sat out on the back porch under the stars, the cool autumn breeze rustling the trees. Clara looked at me and whispered that she had spent her whole life trying to step out of her sister's shadow, only to find her own light in the most unexpected place. I smiled, realizing that the house which had once felt like a tomb was now filled with real warmth and potential. Sometimes, a clean break is the only way to let the light back in, and sometimes, the best beginnings are found right in the wreckage of your worst endings.